The Coldstream Guards story begins in an era when stability was fragile and the distinction between order and chaos could hinge on a single decision. From their earliest formation in the mid-17th century, they were not merely a collection of soldiers, but a carefully selected group whose value lay as much in discipline as in courage. Each man was chosen for endurance, temperament, and the ability to remain composed when events threatened to unravel around him. Early leaders understood that success depended not on impulse or brute strength, but on the steady accumulation of experience, measured decisions, and meticulous preparation. Their first assignments were not always marked by dramatic combat, yet they tested patience, cohesion, and the subtle art of leadership in ways that would define the regiment for centuries. The weight of expectation fell upon every individual, and the smallest lapse could ripple through the ranks with consequences far beyond a single soldier. In these early decades, the Coldstream Guards learned to balance ceremonial duties with practical readiness. Their presence at strategic locations, in the courts of dignitaries, and during public ceremonies was more than display. It reinforced habits of discipline and collective responsibility. Soldiers internalized the notion that every ordered step, every drill, and every observed command contributed to a larger purpose. This culture of precision fostered trust not only among comrades, but between the regiment and the state it served. A single failure could jeopardize not only a mission, but the reputation and cohesion that had been painstakingly cultivated. Listeners should sense the deliberate pace of this development, where quiet, methodical progress set the stage for the trials yet to come. By the mid-18th century, the regiment faced broader European engagements that tested its adaptability. Even before encountering foreign battlefields, leaders emphasized the importance of internal order, communication, and logistics. The ability to move men and resources efficiently, to anticipate challenges, and to respond calmly under pressure became essential skills. Unlike other units whose renown relied on individual heroics, the Coldstream Guards' reputation grew from the disciplined execution of countless small decisions. Observers would note that their reliability was the product of countless hours spent mastering the routine, observing subtleties, and fostering a mutual dependence among soldiers that extended beyond camaraderie into operational necessity. Life in the regiment demanded rigorous attention to details that often seemed trivial but carried profound consequences. Weapons maintenance, rationing, sentry rotations, and adherence to protocol were all exercises in responsibility. Soldiers learned to act as extensions of one another, understanding that a single lapse could undermine the whole unit. This cultivated a quiet confidence, a recognition that steadiness, more than impulse, often determined the outcome of a mission. Even in moments of calm, men bore the weight of vigilance, their discipline transforming potential chaos into measured action. Early campaigns provided practical tests of the regiment's principles. Leaders and soldiers alike faced decisions that required balancing limited resources, evaluating enemy movements, and maintaining composure under pressure. These choices, seemingly small in isolation, gradually shaped both the character of the men and the institutional identity of the Coldstream Guards. Each success and each lesson learned reinforced a culture of deliberate, steady action that would carry through decades of service. The narrative here is one of accumulation, experience, discipline, and mutual trust building, layer upon layer, crafting a foundation robust enough to face the uncertainties of future conflict. The Coldstream Guards had solidified habits that would define them for generations. The emphasis on preparation, discipline, and controlled action established a legacy that transcended individual personalities or specific missions. Soldiers learned that their reliability was a force multiplier, enhancing both cohesion and effectiveness. The audience should feel the weight and significance of these formative choices, appreciating the quiet, persistent effort required to transform a newly formed regiment into a dependable instrument of state. These foundations would soon encounter the tests of foreign campaigns and extended service, where the lessons learned in relative calm would meet the pressures of European conflict. The enduring reputation of the Coldstream Guards rested on this careful, deliberate preparation, and on the understanding that every measured action contributed to the survival and success of the unit. And it was this rigorous cultivation of discipline and cohesion that would later define their response to challenges far greater than anything faced in these early years. The Coldstream Guards faced their first extended tests on foreign soil in the mid-18th century, where the quiet discipline of their early years was measured against the unpredictability of European campaigns. From the outset, leaders recognized that success depended not only on courage in battle, but on the steady application of training, foresight, and adaptability in circumstances that were often unfamiliar and unforgiving. Deployments abroad demanded careful planning, supply lines were fragile, weather could disrupt movement, and local conditions challenged both morale and operational efficiency. Soldiers learned quickly that survival and effectiveness required attention to every detail, from maintaining equipment to observing terrain and understanding the limitations of fellow units. The regiment's early reputation for reliability became an asset in these contexts, as commanders relied on their ability to execute orders precisely and maintain cohesion even under duress. In these campaigns, the Coldstream Guards encountered both logistical and strategic obstacles. Troops had to negotiate unfamiliar landscapes, coordinate with allies whose practices differed from their own, and maintain readiness in the face of long marches, limited rations, and persistent exposure to the elements. Decisions that might seem minor, a choice of encampment, timing of a march, or allocation of supplies, could ripple through the regiment, affecting endurance and combat effectiveness. Leaders emphasized observation, anticipation, and discipline over rash action. Soldiers internalized a culture of calculated response, recognizing that patience and foresight were as essential as marksmanship or physical endurance. Each challenge, no matter how mundane it appeared, contributed to the regiment's growing proficiency and cohesion. Battles themselves were as much a test of coordination as of courage. Engagements often involved complex maneuvering against numerically superior or strategically positioned opponents. The Coldstream Guards' emphasis on formation, communication, and measured response allowed them to adapt when initial plans faltered. Individual bravery mattered, but the regiment's reputation for steadiness derived from collective execution, men moving in concert, observing discipline under pressure, and following orders precisely the outcomes of every choice, noting which adjustments preserved effectiveness and which undermined it. These lessons informed subsequent campaigns, reinforcing an approach that valued continuity, reliability, and the long-term accumulation of experience. Soldiers faced not only external threats, but also fatigue, isolation, and the psychological strain of extended service abroad. Cohesion relied on mutual trust and understanding that each man's discipline had tangible consequences for the unit's survival. Morale was maintained not through speeches or displays of force, but through consistent practice, steady leadership, and the reassurance that each individual's contribution was recognized and valued. Listeners should sense the quiet weight of these challenges, appreciating how endurance, observation, and careful decision-making shaped both the men and the regiment's emerging identity. Every campaign provided incremental lessons that would shape the regiment's approach for decades. Troop placement, timing of maneuvers, and judicious use of reserves demonstrated the importance of preparation and foresight. Soldiers learned to anticipate complications and to respond in ways that preserved cohesion while maximizing effectiveness. The Coldstream Guards were not merely responding to immediate threats, they were cultivating a habit of strategic thinking, where each action reinforced the capacity for disciplined response under future uncertainty. The audience should feel the development of this intellectual and operational framework, understanding that the regiment's reputation rested on its methodical, cumulative approach to challenge. Through these years, the regiment's identity evolved alongside its experiences. Early theoretical training gave way to applied expertise in both strategy and human management. Each campaign reinforced the principle that disciplined preparation and attention to detail outweighed impulsive heroics. Soldiers internalized an understanding that patience, observation, and careful execution were often the most decisive factors in determining outcomes. The Coldstream Guards' consistency became a quiet standard against which other units were measured, earning the trust of commanders and the implicit confidence of allies. These foreign deployments set the stage for larger, more consequential engagements in the coming decades, where the principles established here would be tested against the full force of European warfare. The regiment's capacity to endure, adapt, and maintain cohesion under pressure was being forged, preparing them for challenges that would define their legacy. The Napoleonic Wars presented the Coldstream Guards with challenges that tested the full measure of their training, discipline, and cohesion. From the outset, leaders recognized that battlefield conditions were rapidly evolving, demanding decisions that weighed immediate necessity against long-term strategic outcomes. Soldiers were required not only to execute orders, but to internalize the broader intent behind them, understanding how each maneuver, each choice of formation, and each response to enemy movement could shape the course of engagements and, ultimately, the reputation of the regiment. The stakes were high, and the pressures of extended campaigns in hostile territories demanded a careful balance between courage, restraint, and tactical awareness. The ability to maintain composure under stress, to act decisively without hesitation, became a defining trait of the Coldstream Guards, distinguishing them from units whose valor was measured solely by boldness. Marches across foreign terrain were arduous and often unpredictable, requiring meticulous planning and adaptation to constantly changing conditions. Soldiers confronted long distances, inclement weather, and the strain of carrying equipment over challenging landscapes. Every decision, from the route taken to the pacing of the march, had direct consequences for readiness and endurance. The leadership emphasized foresight and the anticipation of complications, ensuring that men were prepared for eventualities that might arise without warning. In this way, discipline was not merely a matter of obedience, but a practical tool for survival and operational efficiency. Men learned to trust in both the training they had received and the decisions of their superiors, creating a cohesion that allowed the regiment to function reliably even under extreme pressure. On the battlefield, the Coldstream Guards' effectiveness relied on a combination of measured execution and situational awareness. Engagements were often fluid, with enemy forces exploiting gaps and attempting maneuvers that demanded immediate, considered responses. Rather than reacting impulsively, the regiment maintained cohesion, responding to threats in a manner that reinforced their formation and ensured collective security. Leadership decisions were critical in these moments. Choosing when to advance, hold, or reorient could determine both immediate survival and the outcome of the larger engagement. Soldiers internalized the principle that every action had both immediate and long-term consequences, cultivating an understanding of responsibility that went beyond individual bravery to encompass the welfare of the unit as a whole. The human dimension of these campaigns was pronounced. Exhaustion, injury, and the constant pressure of danger required soldiers to manage both physical and psychological strain. Cohesion depended on trust and the knowledge that each man's discipline directly impacted the group's effectiveness. Leaders fostered morale not through rhetoric, but through consistent practices, measured expectations, and the quiet reassurance that preparation and experience would guide decisions under fire. Men developed an acute awareness of timing, spacing, and positioning, understanding that their survival and the regiment's reputation depended on actions that were deliberate and precise. Listeners should feel the slow accumulation of these experiences, building respect for the quiet endurance and intelligence underlying military competence. Engagements during this period also revealed the interplay between strategy and improvisation. While planning was essential, unexpected developments required rapid assessment and adaptable responses. The Coldstream Guards demonstrated an ability to balance adherence to orders with the flexibility to respond to shifting conditions, a dual capacity that reinforced their reliability and elevated their standing among Allied forces. Every decision reinforced the importance of foresight, attention to detail, and the collective understanding that disciplined execution could mitigate the risks inherent in warfare. Through the Napoleonic campaigns, the Coldstream Guards' identity became firmly linked with measured courage and operational competence. Their reputation grew not through spectacle or singular acts of heroism, but through a consistent pattern of deliberate, well-executed choices under extreme pressure. Soldiers and leaders alike internalized lessons of endurance, cohesion, and the careful management of risk, laying the foundation for continued effectiveness in subsequent decades. And it was this careful balancing of preparation, observation, and disciplined action under the relentless pressures of continental warfare that cemented the Coldstream Guards as a regiment capable of withstanding the most demanding challenges without faltering. The mid-19th century saw the Coldstream Guards extend their influence beyond European battlefields, serving across the British Empire in roles that tested adaptability, endurance, and leadership under conditions far removed from home. Their responsibilities shifted from purely combat-oriented engagements to a combination of garrison duties, policing, and ceremonial obligations, each demanding careful judgment and measured execution. Officers and soldiers alike were required to navigate unfamiliar social, cultural, and geographic environments, understanding not only military necessity, but the subtle political and strategic implications of their presence. Every decision, from patrol routes to resource allocation, from interaction with local populations to maintenance of internal order, carried consequences that could affect both immediate operational success and the broader reputation of the regiment. The discipline instilled over previous decades became essential, ensuring that even in distant and challenging circumstances, the Coldstream Guards maintained cohesion, credibility, and effectiveness. Service abroad introduced logistical complexities unfamiliar in earlier campaigns. Supplying men across remote territories required foresight, planning, and adaptability, often in climates that tested endurance and morale. Soldiers learned to anticipate shortages, manage fatigue, and respond to environmental hazards with the same measured approach that had guided them in European conflicts. Leadership emphasized preparation and the consistent application of protocol, reinforcing the understanding that minor miscalculations could have outsized consequences. Even routine duties demanded vigilance. Every detail, from sanitation to watch rotations, was a factor in sustaining both the health and readiness of the unit. Audiences should sense the quiet weight of responsibility carried by the men, appreciating how seemingly mundane tasks were intertwined with strategic effectiveness and the preservation of reputation. Encounters with local populations, whether cooperative or hostile, added layers of complexity to the regiment's mission. Soldiers were expected to act with restraint, authority, and judgment, balancing firmness with discretion. Missteps could escalate into diplomatic incidents or undermine operational goals, requiring leaders to cultivate not only tactical acumen, but cultural awareness and emotional intelligence. The Coldstream Guards' ability to maintain professionalism in these interactions further reinforced their status as a reliable and disciplined unit. Listeners should perceive how the regiment's training in observation, judgment, and adherence to protocol allowed them to navigate ambiguity and maintain effectiveness even where combat was not the primary concern. The psychological dimensions of extended imperial service were significant. Soldiers contended with isolation, homesickness, and the monotony of routine duties, all while remaining alert to potential threats or disruptions. The regiment's culture of mutual accountability and measured response mitigated these challenges, ensuring that men maintained focus and cohesion even when immediate danger was absent. This period reinforced a fundamental lesson. Discipline and preparation were not limited to battle. They were essential to sustaining operational effectiveness under any circumstances. Every decision, no matter how minor, contributed to the broader capacity of the regiment to endure, adapt, and fulfill its mission. Training and leadership adapted to meet these diverse challenges. Officers emphasized situational awareness, procedural rigor, and the careful balancing of initiative with obedience. Soldiers learned to interpret orders within a broader context, understanding the strategic rationale behind each directive. This cultivated not only competence, but confidence, enabling men to act decisively when unforeseen situations arose. The cumulative effect was a regiment capable of functioning effectively across a spectrum of roles, from ceremonial duty to operational engagement, and adaptable enough to respond to both expected and unforeseen demands. By the conclusion of these imperial deployments, the Coldstream Guards had developed a reputation that extended beyond battlefield valor. Their reliability, judgment, and adaptability became defining characteristics, reinforcing the image of a regiment that could meet the full range of military and political challenges imposed by service across the empire. Listeners should feel the gradual consolidation of these traits, recognizing the interplay between disciplined preparation, measured execution, and the enduring influence of institutional culture. And it was through these distant postings and complex responsibilities that the Coldstream Guards refined their ability to act with calm authority, a skill that would be tested anew in the more intense conflicts of the latter 19th century. The mid-19th century brought the Coldstream Guards into conflicts that tested both their traditional methods and their capacity to adapt to changing warfare. As technology advanced and battlefields evolved, the regiment faced new challenges that demanded careful decision-making, strategic awareness, and disciplined execution. Officers recognized that success relied not solely on courage, but on the ability to integrate emerging tactics, manage resources efficiently, and anticipate the movements of both allies and adversaries. Soldiers were required to balance adherence to established procedures with responsiveness to unexpected circumstances, ensuring that cohesion and effectiveness were maintained even when plans did not unfold as anticipated. Each engagement became an exercise in judgment, where measured responses outweighed impulsive action, and foresight was as critical as physical endurance. Deployments during this period were marked by logistical complexity and operational uncertainty. Troops confronted extended marches over difficult terrain, the threat of disease, and the demands of maintaining readiness under conditions that could fluctuate rapidly. Decisions about rationing, rotation of duties, and allocation of forces had direct consequences for both morale and combat effectiveness. Leadership emphasized anticipatory planning and the careful monitoring of resources, cultivating a culture in which soldiers understood that their attention to detail and adherence to protocol could determine the outcome of an operation. Listeners should sense the quiet intensity of these preparations, appreciating the balance of discipline and adaptability that underpin the regiment's effectiveness. Engagements were often influenced by innovations in artillery, firearms, and battlefield communication. The Coldstream Guards demonstrated an ability to integrate these developments without sacrificing the core principles of discipline and cohesion that had defined them for decades. Officers trained their men to observe carefully, respond precisely, and maintain formation even under the pressure of unfamiliar circumstances. The regiment's capacity to combine traditional drills with evolving tactics ensured that they remained effective and reliable, providing commanders with a steady force capable of executing complex maneuvers. The audience should perceive the interplay between experience, training, and adaptation, understanding that the Coldstream Guards' success rested on the careful alignment of these elements rather than on individual heroics. The human dimension of mid-century campaigns remained a central consideration. Soldiers endured fatigue, injury, and the psychological strain of extended service, yet cohesion was sustained through trust, consistent leadership, and shared understanding of responsibilities. Morale depended on the perception that each man's discipline directly supported the group's effectiveness and survival. Through these challenges, soldiers developed a heightened awareness of timing, positioning, and judgment, recognizing that measured responses often determined both individual and collective outcomes. The listener is invited to appreciate the intellectual as well as physical demands placed upon the regiment, fostering a deep respect for their endurance and prudence. Mid-century conflicts also reinforced the importance of institutional identity and tradition. The Coldstream Guards were conscious of their reputation, understanding that their conduct influenced not only immediate operational success, but the long-term perception of the regiment within the military and public spheres. Leadership emphasized consistency, professionalism, and strategic foresight, instilling habits that balanced adherence to tradition with responsiveness to innovation. Every action, from the execution of maneuvers to the maintenance of discipline, contributed to a narrative of reliability and competence that defined the regiment in the eyes of allies and adversaries alike. Through these decades, the Coldstream Guards solidified a framework of resilience and adaptability that would carry them into the conflicts of the late 19th century. Their identity was shaped not by dramatic displays of valor, but by cumulative, disciplined decision-making, careful observation, and unwavering cohesion. Listeners should feel the methodical building of capability, understanding how experience, preparation, and careful judgment became inseparable from the regiment's enduring reputation. And it was within these mid-century trials, through a combination of adaptation, steadfast discipline, and strategic insight, that the Coldstream Guards honed the qualities that would define their effectiveness in the century to come. The closing decades of the 19th century tested the Coldstream Guards in ways that combined all the lessons of their long history. The regiment's experience, forged through centuries of discipline, strategy, and careful decision-making, was brought to bear on conflicts that demanded both adaptability and steadfastness. Officers and soldiers alike understood that their reputation rested not on isolated acts of bravery, but on consistent performance, cohesion, and the ability to make precise decisions under pressure. Every maneuver, every choice of deployment, and every maintenance of internal order had consequences that extended beyond the immediate moment, influencing both the success of operations and the enduring legacy of the regiment. The men carried not only the weight of their mission, but the responsibility of upholding centuries of tradition, understanding that their actions would define how the Coldstream Guards were remembered in history. Campaigns during this period were increasingly complex, involving coordination across multiple units, adaptation to new technologies, and responses to evolving tactics on the battlefield. Soldiers relied on the accumulated experience of their forebears, applying lessons learned in earlier wars to navigate unforeseen challenges. The regiment's strength lay in its ability to integrate preparation, observation, and disciplined execution, ensuring that even under pressure, they acted with deliberate purpose. Leaders emphasized the importance of foresight, encouraging soldiers to anticipate potential developments and respond in ways that preserved cohesion and operational effectiveness. This approach allowed the Coldstream Guards to maintain reliability in situations where other units might falter, reinforcing their reputation as a regiment capable of meeting the highest demands of military service. Life in the field remained physically and psychologically demanding. Extended campaigns required endurance, careful rationing, and attention to detail in all aspects of military life. Soldiers understood that discipline and mutual trust were essential not only for survival, but for sustaining morale and cohesion. Each man's conduct influenced the wider group, and the regiment functioned as a unified entity where individual actions had immediate and long-term consequences. Leaders cultivated an environment in which measured judgment, steady application of training, and thoughtful response to evolving circumstances were prioritized over impulsive action. Listeners should perceive the quiet rigor that underpinned every decision, appreciating how the regiment's culture of preparation and cohesion translated into consistent operational success. The Coldstream Guards also maintained ceremonial and symbolic roles that reinforced discipline and identity. Guarding key institutions, participating in public events, and upholding traditions required the same attention to detail and exacting standards that informed combat operations. Soldiers learned to navigate the subtle demands of these responsibilities, recognizing that their conduct influenced public perception, strategic confidence, and institutional reputation. This dual function, operational and ceremonial, reinforced the importance of consistent performance and the careful alignment of practice with principle. The regiment's professionalism became a defining trait, respected both within the military hierarchy and among the wider public. As the 19th century drew to a close, the Coldstream Guards had solidified a legacy built on centuries of careful decision-making, strategic foresight, and disciplined execution. The combination of battlefield experience, institutional knowledge, and adherence to principle allowed them to meet the challenges of modern warfare while preserving the traditions that defined their identity. Soldiers understood that every choice, whether in combat or routine duties, contributed to the enduring reputation of the regiment. The audience should feel a sense of culmination, recognizing that the regiment's strength derived not from spectacle or impulsive heroics, but from the careful cultivation of reliability, cohesion, and disciplined action over generations. Throughout these decades, the Coldstream Guards embodied the principle that preparation, observation, and steadfast discipline are as decisive as courage on the battlefield. Their legacy was not built on singular moments, but on the consistent application of learned wisdom, the careful execution of orders, and the maintenance of cohesion under pressure. This approach ensured that the regiment remained a respected and reliable element of Britain's military, capable of meeting the complex demands of both empire and conflict. The Coldstream Guards story in the 19th century demonstrates the enduring power of experience, discipline, and measured judgment, showing how a regiment can preserve its identity and effectiveness across centuries of service. Their reputation, carefully earned through consistent performance and thoughtful decision-making, remains a testament to the enduring values that defined Britain's oldest regiment under fire.